key to unlocking your chronically ill Lyme brain wasn't really another medication or supplement, but maybe a speck of a psychedelic mushroom. Today on the Lyme Insider, we're going to be diving into microdosing and how using subperceptual doses of psilocybin and potentially other psychedelic medicines has been helping patients overcome chronic illness and chronic states of depression, anxiety, many other brain states, many of these neuropsychiatric symptoms that our Lyme patients and PANS patients have, to allow them to reclaim their minds, their mood, and their momentum. Is this the future of functional medicine? Let's find out. Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Lyme Insider, and we're going to be diving deep into this, concept that's been gaining a lot of traction over the last several years, and it's the use of psychedelics in mental health and the chronic illness spaces. And one of the things that's so interesting is there's really a couple ways to go about this. And one is using, kind of standard psychedelic doses, like a lot of people might have heard from their friends, going out to a party in college. But there's also this concept of microdosing where folks aren't really experiencing sort of a true psychedelic phenomena, but the medications that we're using, these plant medicines, are actually scientifically shown and clinically proven to change the way we think for the better. And I'm really excited because today I'm joined with a specialist in the area of microdosing, a good friend and coach in microdosing, Seth Marcus. He's at themindmill.com, and I really just wanted to say, Seth, thanks so much for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic because I think there's a lot of people who have they have an opinion about this when they hear the word psychedelic, right, immediately. But there's a lot of research out there, and I think there's a huge difference between, big full-on ceremonies and journeys and this microdosing. But that word ceremony for me, whenever I work with anybody with supplements, medications, or even psychedelics, I think that that's an important piece of it. And that's what I love about your approach, is it's really structured and scientifically and coaching based so that we can see people's lives moving forward. And so thank you so much for making the time to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. Stoked to be here.
Yeah. So one of the things is I love doing is just breaking the ice with tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I'm personally sick of dry, boring bios, so I stopped doing them. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background, what got you into this, a little bit about your journey, and then for everybody listening, we're going to dive super deep into this. There's published case reports showing microdosing helping in Lyme. We've heard all kinds of other things. I presented on psychedelics at at autism conferences and other medical conferences. So we've got great data. But more importantly, what I want to share with you today with Seth and his expertise is how do we actually use this in real life to make real changes in the way we think and open our hearts so that we can have a much more joyful life. So Seth, tell us about your story, man.
Sure. So I'm a mindful psychedelic coach. I specialize in helping high performers, usually a bit of the older generation, we're talking Gen Xer, baby boomers, learn how to use microdosing specifically to enhance their mindfulness and to change their lifestyle later in life. A lot of people may have had early experiences, that classic, I tried LSD in the 60s or 70s, or maybe a horror story of going to a concert and getting lost and losing their mind. And I'm here to offer education, safety, and a specific professional approach to helping people integrate these new medicines into their lives in a responsible way, rather than just throwing them right into the deep end, like a lot of people are learning these days.
Yeah, I think it's so good, because I have people ask me all the time, and I refer them to people like you because, we're seeing more and more decriminalization and legalization of these things, but people are using it anyway. And I think that as a physician, I have this responsibility to make sure that people are getting the best approach, the best care and the best support with whatever they choose to do in their own lives, because ultimately our job is to help people feel better. What got you interested in this? I mean, it's kind of it's something I always wonder about, is what drives someone into this area? Because I love learning about people's passions.
Yeah, well, in short, psychedelics have saved my life. They radically changed my life, and it wasn't a specific moment that changed everything. It was a journey that I chose to start way back in high school when I first tried my own irresponsible psychedelic trip, all the way to my first intentional ayahuasca ceremony back about 12 years ago now, and then leading to coaching and moving into microdose coaching specifically. I started back in high school, just like anybody else. You hear about mushrooms, they kind of seem like, oh, well, at least for where I'm from, you may try cigarettes or alcohol, maybe some weed. And then the next tier up would be something like, ideally in my case, mushrooms or some sort of psychedelic, rather than moving into opiates or pills or cocaine or some of these more narcotic. But I think that if your upbringing is anything like mine, there's kind of this linear approach to substances you're willing to try in your younger years. And I've learned a lot in my profession, but it seems like there's a huge kind of glaring need for that stigma to be shifted. And that's what I learned throughout my over 20 years of working with psychedelics now, that is now part of my profession, is helping people understand what these medicines are so that they can apply it to themselves and see radical improvements in their lives, rather than the fear of destabilization or to lose their mind in a bad trip.
In a moment, I do want to go back and talk about really some of the specifics, like why people like you and I draw a distinction between recreational use and medicinal use in these substances and these plant medicines. But before we get there, I just want to give people a preview of where we're going. What are the kinds of, changes that you see in people's lives, both maybe from your own experience and how you said psychedelics saved your life? Because I hear that often. And then even with the people who are maybe doing microdosing, like what, can you just give us a kind of a 50,000 foot view of the positive benefits people see?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people approach microdosing for one of a few reasons. Either they're struggling with focus and clarity, they're looking for more creativity in their lives, they're also struggling with addiction or anxiety and depression, or they're looking for their relationships to improve, both within themselves as well as their interpersonal relationships. And somewhere in those categories is where most people find their breakthroughs. And I find personally that while deep journey work can be amazing for these big breakthroughs, working with something like microdosing, in my opinion, has a much more of a long-term success because it's part of your lifestyle. It's a regular occurrence that you are doing with a small sub-perceptual dose of these psychedelics, and then making slow changes over time so you can see amazing momentum gathering, rather than sometimes going into deep journey work and then ideally integrating and hoping that changes your life from that point forward. So most of the time, people are coming with some variety of those needs in their life.
Like one of the things is, experience and a strong sort of medical opinion about the best way to set up sort of a more deep work, as you say, like a full-on psychedelic experience. And so much of that is, for me, and it's anything in life, is that intention that you have coming in and the preparation. Then you have the experience, but a lot of it the experience is clouded or guided by what you're coming in with and what you want to achieve. But then also the long term, we hear a lot about integration work and the long term. And I'm really interested because I talk about health like a lifestyle, not a thing you do for now. It's like, the way we eat, the way we act every day is that lifestyle. So that term really means a lot for me. So when you're looking at whether it's a deep work and like a bigger psychedelic ceremony, or more specifically with microdosing, how do you make that a lifestyle, and what's included in there that actually leads to these changes?
Yeah, well, you nailed it. Health is a lifestyle, and we can do these big cathartic experiences like a deep journey, but if we're not taking our setting seriously and we're not taking our integration seriously, it just ripples into nothing. It doesn't have a real lasting impact in our lives. So when we talk about integration or microdosing, these are the longer term plays. These are the things that take these profound experiences and they integrate them into being a full part of our being that we execute every single day. Dan Harris talks about being just 10% happier, right? Like, what does that look like on a daily basis? And from my experience, whether people are coming to me looking for integration after a deep journey, or they're looking to do the microdosing programs that I offer, they notice that over time, using things like breath work, grounding, biophysical resets, journaling, as well as some of the other modalities that we know, health and wellness, these are the things that have more lasting benefit than just the new substance that they're trying of one dose of a psychedelic.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the journal, the microdosing journal, because when I look at it, is a lot of people are spending a lot in my field. They're spending a lot of time writing down what's wrong, as opposed to writing down what's right and or what they're grateful for. And so maybe we can dive into a little bit, because I think this is a core part of the work. Is so if what's actually in being contained, what's part of the practice? I mean, how do we, because we talked a lot about that set and setting, right? And it's so for a lot of people, it's hey, it's literally what it sounds like. It's the setting in which you're in and the intention with which you bring into it, and the support that you have around you during, say, a bigger experience. But the whole integration piece for me is kind of really what becomes a lifestyle, which becomes how do you wake up every day, whether that's the day you're taking a microdose or not. To me, it's almost like the mindset work is the key part, and the medicine is a gateway to that. I mean, was that kind of correct, or what's your experience?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Some of the experiences that I've had in my own personal journey work, specifically with ayahuasca, the story or the picture that I like to paint is that we're walking through the dark forest of our lives, and we're not quite sure where we're heading. We're just taking one step at a time, navigating the creeks, the streams, the trees, and every now and then we get an opportunity to climb an amazing tree. And we have this unique experience where we climb to the top of a tree, and for just a short amount of time, we get to see above the trees, and we see, oh, in the distance, there's my destination. That's where we're heading. This is beautiful. I have that clarity. But then we have to climb back down that tree, and we have to keep walking through that dark forest with the understanding that there is something out there. And we also know that we still have to do the work. The journey isn't necessarily the work. The journey gives us the illumination, the clarity for us to pursue our next steps with a bit more confidence. So that's how I like to approach our programs. And when it comes to integration or things like being in a state of transition, which a lot of people talk about, I don't know if I've ever not been in a state of integration or transition. It seems like our lives are one day after another constantly in transition and constantly integrating the experiences that we've had, whether they be psychedelic or not. So the programs that I've curated, which is mainly hinged on this flagship product, the Microdosing Journal, and also supported by digital courses that I've created as well, it is designed to first start with the education, talking about safety and best practices in this new world of psychedelics, and specifically of microdosing, because most people don't know hardly anything about it. And if you treat it like it's just another supplement that you put into your daily pill container, you're not going to get what you're looking for out of it. So starting with understanding of what you're doing, and also building a reverence for the practice rather than just another biohack, if you will. We start by talking about education and safety, and then we get into the real meat of it, which is like the tools for success. We're talking about breath work, building a prayer practice, gratitude, affirmation and intention work, clear goal setting. And this is all supported in the journal. And then we go into a 3-month program of daily journaling, where every day there's a fun, kind of flexible daily pages for that exact sequence. A chance to be mindful, whether it's just a few breaths or a 15-minute meditation, whatever it is, a place to enter your gratitude, a place to set one major goal for the day, that kind of eat the frog area where you're like, this is the uncomfortable thing that I know is going to move the needle, and this is what's going to feel, if I just do this, I know it's going to feel like a better day. And then there's areas for tracking and reflecting on your day as well. And to me, that is where the transitions happen. That is where the integration happens. is in the work, is in the journal, where you can find, like every day feels like up, down, left, right emotionally. But when I start to journal and I look at what's been going on, I'm like, after 2 weeks of a microdosing practice, I didn't necessarily notice an immediate change, but looking back, I can tell that like I'm having more good days than I'm having bad days. And 2 weeks ago, I was way more negative in what I thought, how my day went. When my wife or my partner or someone would ask me how my day is, I like to complain about that one bad thing, that guy who cut me off. But now I'm actually reflecting more on the positive things in my life. And that's where we get into these like subtle shifts that happen over time. And using something like a journal can really help. Whether or not you're microdosing, can help you see that 30,000 foot view that you're talking about of what's actually going on in my life on a more macro level rather than on that micro level, which seems to be like this emotional stock ticker, right? Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. And especially being in a founder lifestyle, you feel like a failure and a victor every single day, right? Taking big leaps, taking chances. It really helps, at least in my practice, to have something I can reflect back on and actually see the progress over time.
It's so interesting because as you're talking, I'm like, these are things I recommend for people each and every day. And one of the things that's interesting is I've always drawn in chronically ill people. I've noticed that they have similar nutritional deficiencies as elite endurance athletes. And because endurance athletics are a big part of my life, I've always noticed that. But then it's like you're drawing this comparison to like entrepreneurs and founders of companies. And as you're talking, like, I win big, I fail big every single day. It's just normal life, and you're on a journey, and it's not about what you did before, it's what you do next. That reminds me a lot of what I try to coach our Lyme patients on, is we're all going through the same human experience. We just have different labels or colors behind it. Some day it says I'm the CEO and other people are like, I'm the patient. So I think that's so critical. And one of the things I love about the journal, when you look at the kind of the way you lay it out, is it's really simple. And for me as a clinician, one of the things I love is I can refer someone, and even if they don't want to microdose, I know it's based on sound mental science and moving forward, and so they can learn about the microdosing, but they also have a very simple way to do it. Because as many people know me, like I tell them, like, write down 3 wins for the day at the end of the day, and then pre-program 3 wins for tomorrow, read them at night, in the morning, be grateful. But then I go from there to super crazy deep practices. And sometimes it's like, this is what you do in the morning, this is what you do in the evening, and it's like right in front of you, open, one side of the page, the other side. And I think it's so critical that whether we're going through a therapeutic thing or we're just living life, I love the 3-month protocol too, because 3 months is enough to create a habit. So what I would recommend is you do your first 3 months and then you get a new journal. You order a new one and just keep going, because one of the things that we both mentioned is a lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
What happens? I mean, like, why did you choose 3 months? I mean, I know what I would start with 3 months, but I'm just always curious, like, if someone comes into the program, right? Like, aside, are there particular protocols you're following? Is 3 months a magic number, or like what's the kind of the scoop around the structure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I find that it takes about 3 months to make a new habit into a lifestyle, especially if you really stick with it, right? Because inevitably there's going to be like those 2 weeks of like excitement and very strict adherence to the new diet, the new routine, whatever it may be. Then you start to feel like you're making progress. You maybe start to coast a little bit. Then there's like that kind of trough of like, oh, I fell off completely, I'm a failure. Then you get back on the horse, right? So it's never just a straight exponential, oh, this is perfect. At least very rare in my lifestyle as well as that of my clients. So I find that 3 months is a great journey to notice the ups, the downs, and ideally the new adherence to some of the new habits and lifestyles you're trying to implement. As far as the journal and the structure of it, effectively, I created a journal that I wanted to work in. I've been journaling for a long time. And one thing that I noticed way back when I started was that I wasn't sticking with journaling because I didn't like the open page. The just opening a journal and looking at just total blank page, I'm like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna write? You know, and I felt like everything had to be like Hemingway. Like every single word that came out of off my pen had to be perfect, and I would just hyper criticize myself every single sentence, and I wasn't getting anything out of it. I was judging myself right from the beginning. So I ended up starting to work with a different structured journal that I really enjoyed, and that inspired me to create, okay, what would my perfect journal look like? And
nice.
And then once I had created my perfect journal, I realized, well, this resonates with a lot of people. A lot of people want something that's structured, but also flexible, so they can use the areas that really resonate with them, be challenged by a little bit, and maybe not use the other parts. If, like, for example, if you're a digital calendar person, you may not use the daily written calendar like some of the other users will. However, other people love the written calendar. They love to have a chance to write out their ideal day before getting after it. So the journal is structured to have that perfect blend between the two. And truthfully, the kind of hidden secret that I'll tell you, Tom, is that you can use this journal without microdosing. It's effectively just a great journal. The reason I created it for microdosing is, one, because I wanted to include a lot of education about, number two, a subject that nobody really knows much about. And there was a huge need in the market for applicable education. I find that in the psychedelic space, people tend to lean way too medical and scientific, with like citing studies, journals, which is so needed. Doctors with new studies on PTSD or anxiety, these are huge in the progression of plant medicines. And then the flip side of it is the mystical. People talking about third eye and opening up chakras, and which can get lost on a lot of people too. So the goal of my verbiage in the journal was to make it just applicable, something that I say practical and impactful. Something that you can open up, you can read, and you're like, I understand where this is going. This doesn't have to be super high-minded or super high spiritual. And so it's for the everyday person, the person who's looking to understand and feel safe in this new journey that they're ready to take on.
Yeah, I think it's so critical. And two main, really big things that pop out is, like, I'm a super digital calendar person, but I have to have someone else manage it for me. It's so big. But the thing I find about writing it down is, like, it gives me a chance to prioritize things, right? And you really can't get done more than 1 to 3 really important things a day. I mean, it's very clear. Now, that doesn't mean we don't exercise, we don't do our lifestyle stuff, we don't see patients or do coaching calls. But I mean, like, major things in a day, you can't get a lot done. Because, like, if anyone remembers, like, focusing on a big project, it always takes longer than you think. And then either because you hit bumps in the road or you get in a zone and you keep going. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I missed a call with somebody because I was so in the zone. My calendar beeped me and went off, my assistant, and I was just so focused. And thankfully, it was just someone else trying to sell me, a service. So I apologized and rescheduled. Yeah. But it wasn't like a critical thing. But it was like I was able, by prioritizing on paper, to say, bam, I need to do this. And when I'm in the zone here, there's nothing other than literally like a family medical emergency that gets in the way. So I find that actually I get lost in my digital calendar, and I use my digital calendar to kind of block time. But to really know what I'm doing, there's something neurologically and spiritually really powerful about the pen and paper. So I tell people all the time, plan your ideal day, because if you wake up, like I spent a lot of time with Bob Proctor before he passed, and like, it was always like, when you wake up in the morning, we just always run the same script. So before your feet touch the floor, decide what script you're going to run, right? And, and if you like to journal first thing in the morning rather than just think in bed, then obviously sit up and journal if you want. But the point being is program your day. And what Seth is really talking about here, I think, is creating your ideal day, whether you're using, psychedelics to support that or not. But the other part that I think is so like really important. And I was like trying to figure out, do we want to talk about some science here? Because it gets like super nerdy. The science on neuroplasticity and how this works on serotonin, and certain psychedelics work on serotonin or, dopamine receptors, and all this, rewiring of your brain and helping it become easier. I've done studies, or I should say, I've studied the studies. I've done medical presentations that got, full-on medical credit for it. But the bottom line is, it's just like mental masturbation of scientific fact. Doctors need to do it. Researchers need to do it. But when you talk about how do we use it in clinical practice, most doctors don't need to know how it works. They need to know what you're talking about, and patients need to know what you're talking about. So at the end of my, I did a presentation earlier this year at an autism conference on how this could be potentially useful, both in standard doses and microdosing. And at the end, we had this great discussion of all the things that we just avoided by saying we're not going to talk about the how this pharmacology works, because you can go look that up. But the thing is, after this big discussion, I had a bunch of people, including several of the doctors who know the research as well as I do, come up and say, "Hey, Tom, you know how this really works?" And he goes, "Because it opens your heart, and you start to listen to your heart and become one with yourself again." And that's what I hear you saying in everything we've ever talked about. So has that been your experience? I mean, it kind of seems like that's where you go too, but what's your experience with, like, how does it really work? Like, obviously, besides the science that we can mumbo jumbo that we can all go find, and I'll write an article sometime and post it for everybody who wants to nerd out. But how does it really work?
Yeah. I find it's easiest for me to stay in my lane when it comes to these types of questions. And that's why I love open discussions with people like yourself and other doctors and scientists. I was just at the Psychedelic Science Conference in Denver, led by MAPS a few weeks ago at this point, where there were just so many keynotes and panels talking about statistical evidence showing improvements in neuroplasticity or serotonin production and help with veterans, and the power of psychedelic assisted therapy, showing these stats up on the board. And at some point, I take a second and I'm like, I'm just so grateful that that's not the profession that I'm in. I want to work with these types of people, but I'm interested in the anecdotal. I'm interested in, like, what is working for you, what's working for me, what's working for the clients that I work with, and what's working for the people who are engaging with our programs. Because you said it, another word for psychedelics is entheogens, which is the God from within. And whether you're recovering from cancer, I'm a cancer survivor, or dealing with healing from a divorce or loss of a loved one, hard is hard. And any sort of medicine or modality that can help us come back to our center and feel more like our divine best selves, everything flows out of that. We talk about even allopathic doctors that don't believe in psychedelics, they all know about the placebo effect. How when patients believe that they are going to die, they decline, and when they believe that they are healing, they tend to do much better. And psychedelics are just such a huge aid in that, because when you absolutely believe in your own ability to heal, then everything flows from that. You release so much of that stress, and you start living in a place of positivity and opportunity rather than lack and worry and stress. And we talk about stress being the silent killer. So when people start microdosing, when they start implementing just applicable small bite-sized bits of mindfulness, just six breaths beginning the day, or 6 breaths before a meal, or 6 breaths when you're in the car and you're stressed out in traffic, when you start to bring in these little tools that can be amplified by the neuroplasticity provided in microdosing, specifically psilocybin, but in many of these other plant medicines, you really start to see this compounding effect of people just living better lives. And so much comes out of when you're in a place of growth and momentum and clarity and creativity.
Yeah. So much of what we talk about, like, we're talking about psilocybin primarily, but I think the research I've seen the most work done on is psilocybin as well as MDMA, and MDMA is a chemical that's synthesized, but I think that, whatever divinity you believe in, that life force has downloaded the structure that, the discovery of that into our brain to use this. But so as we go through all this from a, just for people's understanding, especially in the Lyme world, we do have the science, right? We're having emerging case reports of people who can't handle antibiotic therapies, who can't handle botanicals, the people who are super sensitive and stuck so long. And even people who can't handle psychiatric medications as a Band-Aid to help them access healing to then hopefully take it off, they're finding microdosing is helping. And we do know that one of the things that I think is interesting is a lot of us talk, I think, or are familiar with sort of this, we throw around this neuroplasticity and everything and like change the way our brain connects. But one of the other things we talk a lot about, just for a quick science nerd out, is this default mode network, right? And that's a part of your brain that basically tells you about yourself and your ego. It's your autobiographical memory, your social cognition and how we perceive other people. If you notice, if you perceive others very positively or very negatively as a default, and it's your predictive mind processing. So the problem with all this, when we go to like what you were just saying, Seth, it's like, what does it look like in real life when you get out of that and you start to make it applicable? Depression, anxiety, OCD, rumination, rigidity of thought patterns. And if you're looking at autism, you're looking at Lyme, you're looking at some of our patients with PANS and PANDAS. So many of my patients, or the parents of my patients, are like, they're so stuck in this very rigid thought pattern, and they have this hypercritical inner dialogue. So this is one of the places where I find it super helpful. In the work you're doing, between the journaling and the microdosing, I mean, what do you see coming up for people? Like, where do they get stuck? How do you help them kind of get over it? Kind of in the thinking about, particularly like my crew loves to have rigid thought patterns, and they love to have, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek, like they don't want it, but it's part of their illness, and there's physiology behind that. But that self-critical inner dialogue and that rigid thought patterns, those are two of the things that come up a lot. I mean, is this something you see? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Neuroplasticity, it's a flexibility of the mind, right? And the ability to create new neurons. I find that regardless of your age, your political views, your ideologies, it's when people are very sure that they know something, where they like, this is the way I am, or this is the way things are. That rigidity is what causes us to kind of begin to decline, in my opinion. And with a lot of my clients, that's tricky. And so when you talk about the default mode network, or decreasing energy to the amygdala, which is your fight or flight response, which are things that they show on brain scans from people who are using psilocybin specifically, it brings back some of that flexibility and open-mindedness that we may have lost over iterations day after day of telling ourselves that this is the way that we are, this is the way that the world is. So it's kind of the substance helps, but we're still, I tell my clients the microdosing is like the lubrication of the engine, right? It makes things run smoother, but you're still fueling it, conducting, right? You're still the one steering the ship. So if you're telling yourself the same negative stories about the world, about your beliefs, about who you can be, the microdosing isn't going to fix that. It might actually use that neuroplasticity, might push you more into that direction. So when you combine it with positive mindset work and beginning to question some of that rigidity and start to loosen up, that's when you start to see the magic of a microdosing practice. And that's why I love working with journaling, and I love the personal coaching side of it, is because we can kind of challenge that day by day and start to kind of push on this. Well, what is that limiting belief? Like, what tells you that this is the way it has to be? And over time, that starts to morph. In a lot of ways, it gets restructured into something that's a much more beautiful and well-rounded. And more neuroplastic approach.
I love it. It's like, because we're on the same page. I think the biggest thing that people run into is they give their power away, right? Like I talk all the time, like I love meditation, but a lot of people I think have a misunderstanding of what that is. And I love that you said prayer, because I don't care what your focus is, do a practice that works with you. But there's a definition of meditation I love, which is to become familiar with. And for me, I add to become familiar with the state in which you want to live. And so the challenge with a lot of our people with chronic illness or just alive on planet Earth is our reflex protective mechanism that's ingrained in us to keep us alive focuses on the negative, because if we're in the plains of Africa or South America and like, hey, look, the neighbors are coming over and like, hey, they're friendly, and then they chop our heads off, well, then we're dead. If we assume they're enemies until proven otherwise, then we're more likely to stay alive. But in modern days, it has gotten, the gain has gotten amped up. It's overkill. And I find that so many of us stay stuck in that negative meditation rather than doing what you're saying, which is focus on what you want. And so whether you're using a substance or not, I found, like, I had a gentleman who was diagnosed with fear of harm, and the physician was giving him high doses of ketamine every other night. Unfortunately, he didn't talk about it the way you do and I do. So he prepped him with nothing. He just said, take it. And then the kid was so blown out by how big the dose was. He had to be supervised by his dad, but he's freaking out. So he started watching action movies. Lots of gunfire, lots of sex, and lots of anger. And so he was basically opened himself completely up and programmed himself with bullshit. So I just wanted to point that out, because what I just heard you say, Seth, was that's a tool to lubricate and open up your system to make it so that this medication can help you achieve your goals. But the work is not, it's almost like the plant medicine is the portal. It opens the portal, it guides you, or like you said, lubricates. But you got to do the work before, during, and after, has been my personal experience. And maybe we can just dive a little deeper and like just reinforce that, because I think that whether you're using psychedelics or not, this applies to general life, this applies to healing from chronic illness, and it very much applies to using plant and other psychedelic medications to help yourself heal as a tool in the process.
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind for me, Tom, is discussing the differentiation and the complementary relationship between therapy and coaching, where therapy is about unlocking past traumas and ideally coming to a more place of presence and understanding, which is also something that we talk about with meditation, becoming familiar with, like understanding oneself. However, I feel like that's where the transfer comes over to coaching, which is more about embracing the present and looking to an absolutely amazing future and picturing your ideal future. And that was a huge transition for me when I was recovering from my illness back in 2019. And that was when I started working with a coach. Is once I felt like I had processed a lot of the trauma from childhood, from my illness, from other parts of my life, I found that I needed something other than just working in that space. And I started looking to work with a coach to help me wire myself for power of positive thinking, for manifestation, for seeing a bright future, becoming an optimist, right? And I see those, I don't like this. It's like kind of like, do you like cats or dogs sort of analogy. It's like, I don't see that like coaching is better than therapy or whatnot. I see them as complementary, right? When we're dealing with so much trauma in our world, psychedelic assisted therapy and just new therapeutic modalities in general is so critical. And that's why it's like leading the charge when it comes to this plant medicine renaissance that we're in right now. However, working with coaches has changed my life, and is the reason I became a coach in the first place, is because it helps me see an amazing bright future. And when we talk about kind of like rigid thinking and becoming familiar with ourselves, with the way that we are right now, or with this moment, one of the things I learned from Tony Robbins events or studying Joe Dispenza is when you can vision a bright, beautiful future and you feel that within, you get this amazing, huge endorphin release, all these different hormones, serotonin that flood your field. And one of two things happens, and this is just my theory, but I don't see any other way, is either one, that is total BS and it just feels really good to feel good, right? But even though it doesn't do anything, you just feel good to feel good. Or
right.
you're reshaping your future and you're creating the universe that you want to be in, and you're becoming the master of your own. So I don't see a downside to it, right? Even if it's not true at all, it's way better than telling yourself that you're a loser all the time, or that the world is so screwed and that we're all just in it, like it's all going to go to shit anytime. I mean, look around us. I mean, it's a little easier for me right now. I'm in Hawaii where I live, but the world is so beautiful. Every day that we're here is an absolute miracle, and we do, at least right now, have this freedom to continue to shape our lives. And that is a really empowering feeling to have, as opposed to like, oh, the world's out to get me. I'm a loser. You know, if it wasn't for these others, everything would be fine, right? That type of victim mindset that we've been so trained just over and over and over again in so many different varieties to feel. It's very empowering to not feel like a victim.
Yeah, and like in my community, the folks that we work with the most, like they feel like either if it's them, they did something wrong, they don't really feel they deserve healing, whether that's a direct thing that they think. I'm not saying anybody does it on purpose, but their nervous system gets so hijacked by the chronic illness along with the medical gaslighting that it really loads up. And then it's like, and if they're a parent, they feel responsible for their kids, but it's just the thing that happens in your life right now. So again, it's like, what are you doing next? And kind of circling back to something you said really early on in our conversations, like you, through the use of plant medicine and the journaling and coaching and all the work you put in on your journey, you rediscovered your passions, and one of the things I always tell people is like, I ask them, like, what is your goal? Like, what is the number one thing you're going to do when you get better? What is the thing that you're longing to do? And it's like, because everybody focuses on the shit they don't want. But like what I hear you just keep saying over and over is focus on what you want and make more of it. And even if today looks a little crappy, if you keep your eye on the prize, so to speak, if you keep focusing, you're more likely to move in that direction. And like I tell the Lyme disease crew, I'm like, look, if you wake up in the morning and you go, you know what, today I'm going to walk around like a person who's overcome Lyme disease already. I'm going to live my passions. I'm going to feel great. You have two options of what's going to happen. One is you're going to just walk around the day feeling better, like you just said, and your body will remind you still have Lyme. You cannot forget about it. Or you're going to completely forget you have Lyme because nothing happens bad to you and your day is better than any day ever. And then guess what? You no longer have Lyme, right? It's like such a mindset shift. So I think I really appreciate you highlighting that, because our folks really, I think I need to hear it. Everybody needs to hear it. And one of the questions, like, because you can listen to a podcast, you can go to an event, like I've been to Joe Dispenza events. I mean, I've studied a lot with Bob Proctor and Mary Morrissey and all these amazing people. I do coaching, but I want to dive a little into like, it's amazing. It's the wind is telling us to open the Microdosing Journal and let it lead our conversation. I go with what the universe tells me. But like, so when I dive into that book over there next to you, why, like, I just want to take a little deeper dive into why do people need coaches? Because a lot of people are like, hey, I'm a coach, I'm a hypnotist, I'm a health coach, I'm a thing. All I know is that, like, I know Mark Hyman, who's like one of the fathers of integrative medicine, and he helped start health coaching, has his own health coach. I know that some of the people that we work with who are our coach, they have their own coaches. And most of them, most successful people have more than one coach. They get a coach in each area of their life that's important, growing their business, their nutrition, their exercise, and in this case, their mindset. Why is it important for someone like me who coaches other people to reach out to somebody like you and say, hey, Seth, I'd love for you to coach me. I need a coach.
Yeah. Well, an investment in a coach is an investment in yourself. full stop. If you're ready to take that next step and you're serious about growth, all the best performers have coaches. And that's what got me into coaching, to hire my first coach, and which was, I think, about 5 years ago now, and what inspired me to become a coach too. And sometimes I feel like there is a gap in the English language on coaching, because it's such a broad spectrum. It's kind of like saying like jam band, right? Like jam could be jazz,
Yeah, right.
bluegrass, rock and roll, funk, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a very broad term, and it also is unfortunately filled with charlatans. Like you could change your social media profile to say you're a coach tomorrow, and nobody's going to challenge that. And I think that naturally leads to skepticism, and that's accurate. That's well earned, because there's a lot of people who offer a lot of BS. And so when you work with a real coach, the key is in radical accountability and support. I mean, I'm the best listener that these people are ever going to have in their life, and I'm getting hired by them to give them exactly the type of guidance that they need to show up for themselves, right? I can't fix them. Nobody ever will be able to fix them. That's our external mindset. That's what we've been trained by, our constructs, whether it's the medical industry. Like when you're sick, you go see a specialist that's going to fix that, as opposed to divine healing.
Yep.
However, working with the right coach will give you the tools and help you unlock things that you never knew about yourself, that result in just such radical empowerment that you look back and you're like, I don't know how I didn't do this before. Like, I didn't know I had this in me. And those are the types of testimonials, the types of results that I've seen in myself when I work with coaches, as well as with my clients that are working with me. And most of the time, people come to me because they're curious about microdosing. And within the first few weeks, they're recognizing that the real strength is in the tools that they're learning about themselves, right? And the microdosing is just another one of those supplements that can help them. Again, it's the lubrication for their engine.
Yeah, it's so critical, because I hear like radical accountability. It's really hard to do that yourself. And I found that, the coaches that I have, it's most of the time I show up to a call and I'm like, yeah, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's like, objectively, am I doing it? Objectively, can they look at something that I'm not doing? And I think it's really critical. And I love what you're saying about, like, it turns out that it's not, the microdosing is almost like an avenue of entry into deeper exploration of true healing. Because I tell the people I know who get better from chronic Lyme disease and other tick-borne infections and mold illness, they do the work to heal. And even in my own healing journey from Lyme and babesiosis of 8 years undiagnosed, 70 to 80% of all my healing was what I did on my own before I even met the doctors that I needed for that last 20%. And then everybody, I'm still sick forever. I relapsed, blah, blah, blah. I'm living, waiting for the ticking time bomb to go off. I'm like, I've been better for over 13 years. And, I firmly believe that at least 70% of all of my healing and all the results I got were from changing this and aligning it with this, changing my mind and getting it in alignment with my heart, using my mind as a tool. So I love that radical accountability. I love the coaching, because it's like you can reflect back to me something that I might not have understood on my own, because your ego kind of gets in the way. And, I think that's the mark of a really good coach. And that's why coaching is so important. And when I see people fail in life or in recovery from illness, it's because they put the responsibility for healing outside their body. I'm like, everything I do is a catalyst, whether it's a conversation, a supplement, a medication, a lifestyle recommendation. They're all meant to be temporary supports, except, obviously lifestyle modifications. We want someone to make a good lifestyle for themselves. But I don't want you on meds forever. And then, as we said, Dr. Kindler published a case report of microdosing psilocybin in a treatment-resistant patient who just probably, if I don't know the particular person, but I know the people we see, it's like, I'm really sensitive. I don't tolerate this. I don't tolerate that. That's true. But my question is why? And I feel like that's what you get when you use a microdosing protocol and you also work with a coach. So one of the things I think a lot of people are interested in is like, and obviously like there are rules and regulations in the United States and there's all these other things, but in terms of like, are there general guidelines on sort of safe and effective microdosing protocols, or is this just because it literally, like, I think in the last, it was either earlier this week or the end of last week, I was on with a patient. They're like, "Oh, I'm in a microdosing group online, and it's just a bunch of people just randomly doing stuff with no training," and I was like, wow. I mean, I know those groups exist, but it was like wildly crazy recommendations. And I was like, I sent her over to you, like I know enough to kind of tell people to get starting and what sounds like a reasonable thing, but that's not my professional calling in life, but is there general guidelines for people who are listening so that like, if they start to go down this route, the number one thing I'd recommend is give you a call and, work with someone who's a professional. And the reason that you're here is because, is I trust you, and there are other people I know that sometimes I can use, but I would still, they're not on this phone call with, on our podcast today for a reason. I mean, to be honest, because that's how I roll, and people know I'm not much of a filter person. I say what I believe in my heart. So yeah, like I feel like it'd be important to just share just a couple tidbits on how do you go about this so that you're not being an idiot, basically, because I've heard some weird shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the question on how to source properly. How does one get started? Because it is too easy to fall into these rabbit holes of either hyper fear state, where people are like, this is dangerous, you're gonna die. I've heard food poisoning. I've heard all sorts of different fallacies about any of these plant medicines, especially just you're gonna go crazy, right? And then there's the flip side of people who are just absolute advocates, kind of like your Timothy Leary types of like, there's no limit, right? You just go for it, right? So it's important to understand what you're getting into. And there's like one of the key reasons I started in microdosing is because I have done those deep journeys, and I recognize that is not the best place to start for most people. If anything, learning the microdosing and having an earned respect for these substances in complementary building of mindset practices, specifically breath work, that's where you start to build that foundation so that when you go deeper into psychedelic work, you're in a good state and you're making sure that you're setting are ideal for deeper work. And one of the other reasons that I do the microdosing is with my clients, I tell them like, look, if you don't feel anything your first day of microdosing, that's good. That means we can titrate up. We can go from there. The last thing I want to do is confirm your fears by giving you too much of a dose, and then all of a sudden you're feeling compromised, driving or parenting or working or whatever it is that you're doing in your day. Like, that is not my goal at all. So that's the absolute baseline. As far as sourcing responsibly, it's just that is the topic of the hour right now, because on one end, these medicines have been growing naturally all over North America and Asia and Africa. I mean, everywhere. They are like
natural
mushrooms are there, and there's a lot of evidence to show that they had a huge part in our development as a species. It's a different subject. So sourcing responsibly, it's like they are all around us. So it could be as easy as going for a foraging mission or to cultivate some of your own, which is also very easy. When it comes to dosing, I'll say it again, starting as low as physically possible is the best way to start. And which is why I personally work with my clients. I make sure that the medicines that they are consuming are independently dosed at the lowest possible dosage. And that way, if they want to take 50% more, 100% more, 200% more, they're still in such low dose ranges that they're not risking intoxication or something that's outside of their comfortability at this point. We're kind of like, I tell them this is like braces for your mind. Like you should feel it, but it's slow, stable shifts rather than deep overboard experiences.
So you're looking at like the shift you're looking for, or what you feel is more the result of the coaching, the journaling, and the microdose, rather than just cranking up the dose so you feel, quote unquote, feel the medicine working. It's more you're looking at the result of it for the most part.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated by the anecdotal results that each of these clients are working with. So whether people are working with me one-on-one in some of my coaching programs, or they're doing the journal and the courses, I love hearing what's coming up for them. Are they having more challenges? Are they having more room for creativity? How is this working in their lifestyle? Most of my clients do not increase their dosage at all. I mean, we stay at low dosage for as long as they choose to microdose. Maybe it varies a little bit, but if you're following a protocol, which I recommend 2 to 4 times per week when you're on, and then occasionally taking about a month off, you never deal with dependency issues, with tolerance, with side effects. That is something that just we have not witnessed at all in our, we've worked with over 300 clients now. So
nice.
When you follow those kind of base guidelines, you set yourself up for success. So it is tricky right now because people don't really know where to turn. And I know that I am in a very, very small category of people who are willing to talk openly about it, but also are professional enough to practice professional discretion and take safety, safety education, harm reduction as like the first step in this process, rather than these are medicines, take your medicine, right? People aren't necessarily ready for that.
Yeah, and I know that with some of the what we've referred to as kind of deeper work, or the sort of more psychedelic dosing and like a proper therapeutic intervention ceremony, whatever you want to call it, whether is that you can really get pretty blown out, both physically, you need time to recover, and then mentally, emotionally, you can be there's a lot to it. But I love the microdosing approach, where you're creating the whole set and setting around it, so that if you ever do need a bigger ceremony, you want to do that, you already have the right framework. But that little bit of change, because ultimately the people I know who use psychedelic medicines often enjoy the experience, often do not enjoy the experience, but they know that in the end, it's the result is what they're looking for. And I hear you saying that, for a lot of people, you might not even need that. You might just need to do a little low dose. And it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking of a buddy of mine, he started microdosing, and he's like, I don't feel anything. I'm like, you're not supposed to. He was thinking he was going to get, essentially work with a little buzz. I'm like, that's not the point. That's not the point,
Yeah. I tell my clients, expect a bit more pleasant and present, not an intoxication, right? I would say that I've had alcohol before, I've had nicotine before, I've had plenty of cannabis in my day, and all of them are more intoxicating than a microdose. To me, I treat my own microdosing practice for focus and clarity during my work. I'm very much like a lunchtime microdoser, where I'll say a prayer and take my microdose before lunch. And then what I experience is heightened focus throughout the afternoon, when typically I would start to kind of deviate, get a little bit more spacey, a little less energetic around that deep work or whatever it is. And then that microdose also kind of stays in me into the afternoon and evening, which is a beautiful transition from work to family and social time where I get to tap in with my friends and my girlfriend, or pick up my guitar and get creative and work on some of the new songs that I'm writing, and really embrace a mindful evening rather than immediately going to, ordering food, Netflix, just veg out time, right? I'm so overstimulated from work that I need to the complete opposite, right? It helps me every day make a better decision, especially in that transitionary time. And I find that a lot of my clients are resonate with that usage of a microdose, where they start getting drowsy in the afternoon. They try to overstimulate with coffee or whatever it is to stay on until the closing bell. Then they have a really hard time making good decisions afterwards. How are they more present with their family, with their kids? Do they get to that gym and work out, or do they just go home and veg out, right? What are you cooking, or are you ordering Uber Eats? These are those little decisions that over time compile to either health and growth or dis-ease.
I just love it because you're speaking to every patient I have, every practitioner that I work with and train. And the reality is, everybody out there, I know so many people who fall into that afternoon lull, and then they get hyperstimulated, over cortisol, either just by being just by pushing through it and not resting and not having that reset. But also, a lot of doctors and other professionals, the coffee kicks in, right? And or they're pounding sugar, whatever. So, and then they're all my evening's a waste, and they want to be more productive, but they don't even know what they want to do, and they just turn on the tube, like you were saying. But I really want to highlight one thing that just I absolutely love. You're I say a prayer. Right. So whatever you call it, whether it's an intention, an affirmation, a prayer, a mantra, I don't give a crap what word you call it. That is so critical. And I tell people, one of the things I find our chronic illness group has a hard time with, they get sick and tired of all the supplements they're taking, all the medications, and everything that they're doing that's a health practice takes on a negative connotation, where I'm this is a prayer. This is a gift to yourself. Be grateful to yourself you're willing to do this. So you're saying, Seth, set the intention for the rest of the day. Treat this as a sacrament, as something so critical to your healing and your living. And it's really interesting when I, a lot of the mindset stuff I teach to entrepreneurs and I teach to patients overcoming chronic illness, boils down to really being crystal clear on what you want to get and making it that sacrament. And a friend of mine said one time, she goes, I think what you're trying to say, because a lot of people try to wait until they're better to do something, whether it's achieve a goal or, whether it's to, I'm going to go, do X, Y, and Z after I get better from Lyme disease. Well, the bottom line is that my friend was saying is that my message is really about the healing is in the living. And it goes back to that passion. And that's what I hear you saying is you use these practices to help you live your best life. And they catalyze that, they support that. And it's your intentionality and your mindset, and probably more importantly, your heart set around it, that really drive the whole thing forward. And it's one of those things, when you say that, I'm just that's what I'm talking about. Make it so much of a sacrament, an important piece of your day, and be grateful for the fact you're doing it.
Yeah. And it's a touchy issue in my mind. It was a big shift for me, and I can see that it's still a big shift for a lot of the people that I work with when you just talk about what prayer is. Because if you're anything like me, I was brought up in the Christian church. It was something that was put on me. It was not an independent choice for me to be brought up Christian, and that resulted in a rebellion and a rejection of that in my my teenage and early adult years. And the result of that was me disowning words like God, like prayer, like amen. These words became I started to lose them. They didn't carry any meaning for me, and I hardly used them. And it wasn't until my own psychedelic work, specifically in ayahuasca, sitting in ceremonies that were held in such amazing intention and integrity that I started to recognize what prayer really was, which is that it's my own personal practice. It's a culmination of all these things. It's a culmination of biophysical resets, whether it's through breath, it's gratitude, expressing what you love and what's so beautiful about this life. It's praying for others. It's picturing that beautiful vision of our world or our lives and living into that. You know, I wear this rosary around my neck that my teacher, my guide, taught me, or she made it for me years ago, and I wear it. And I am not Catholic, never have been, never will be, but it does remind me of how powerful the prayer practice is. And when I have it on me, it reminds me to take it seriously. So it's a huge piece of what I teach in these programs and in my coaching is to develop your own prayer practice. One of my friends, he said that it always stuck with me, and it doesn't matter how you pray, only that you pray. And that was a huge eye-opener for me. And in this section, I don't expect you, maybe we can attach some screenshots or something like that.
Absolutely.
This is the section of the journal that's all about tools for success, which is talking about just this, all the different things that you can do that have nothing to do with psychedelic use or microdosing, but they're tools that you can use throughout your entire life to help better your lifestyle. And I put at the very end this, I call it the creator's prayer, because a lot of the Microdosing Journal is based on rebirthing your creative energy, bringing back your creative force, which is ultimately your life force, because we are creations and we are creators. Everything around us is a result of some sort of creativity. So what I like to guide people through is it's very simple. You know, it's a pause, closing your eyes, taking a few deep breaths, and then I say, make it your own. And then it has these kind of like pick your own adventure. You can express your gratitude, you can raise your vibration, you can set intentions, manifest your abundance, you can just slow down, you can visualize the future, you can think about what makes you happy, or you can just physically smile, right? These are all just options on how to make a prayer your own. And it could be 2 minutes long, it could be 20 minutes long, it could be 20 seconds. It's about your own ritual. And it's such a key part of the microdosing. No matter when I choose to microdose, I take my capsule and I hold it to my chest and I say a quick prayer, just to recognize that this isn't just another external chemical that I'm expecting to fix me. This is a part of my own healing journey. This is a technology that will empower me to heal myself from within, that our ancestors have worked with for just millennia, longer than we can even comprehend. And it's very precious to me. And it's something that I love teaching my clients.
You know, it's so interesting too, because one of the things I love is where the words come from. And so, you know, I look up prayer as we're chatting here, just for what's the ancient Aramaic, like where did it really come into? And, you know, and it means, you know, to lay oneself open or to connect oneself. Right. And I'm like, you just highlighted how to do that in modern day so well. And then it's like, I love the word sacrament, but I was raised Roman Catholic and I was very hazed, and I'm very much in alignment with love thy neighbor as thyself. But I realize that love thy neighbor as thyself means that I need to start with loving myself first, which is part of where we all fuck that up.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you know, sacrament, there's really no direct word like in the old school Aramaic, or like, you know, but it's sort of, some of it boils down to some of these root words. Where it comes out of is a sacred mystery or an invisible grace made manifest. And it's like, how beautiful, you know, or in other languages, it also means like, you know, it's a holy act. It's set apart. It's sacred. There's a divine presence. And so again, I could not agree with you more that bringing these terms out of the dark and out of the closet and the taboo, prayer and sacrament are not bad things. The way you were taught what they meant might have some baggage attached to it, but ultimately it's about in my mind, recognizing the sacredness and the divinity in yourself and connecting deeper to yourself. Because as we learned in the osteopathic profession, everybody's body has the ability to self-regulate and self-heal. And when we look and we realize that we have a triune nature, body, mind, and spirit, the osteopaths have been saying this since the 1800s, not like since 1990 when it became popular. Like, we know, and traditions throughout the planet have known this, maybe use different words, that we're not separate from the planet. And another thing about psychedelics, especially plants, that I find so fascinating is it connects us more with the planet because they are part of the planet. And mycelia are connected. There's an internet streaming across the planet where mushrooms are communicating with each other and all other forms of life. So why not reconnect?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I just love the things you're touching on because it's like right up my alley. It resonates. The thing is too, what's interesting is it resonates with my experience of life. And some of the words you use are not the words that I would use. And I think, as you say, like I look a few things up and I'm like, oh, all right, that's because I think that people get hung up on words. And I'm like, I'm open to all of them. I understand that my parents use certain words, the church used certain words, but that was their words and they put their meaning on it. But I'm older now and I can put my own new meaning on everything. So I really appreciate you guiding us through that. Kind of like as we roll things together, a couple closing quickies, just because I always like to, see where people are coming from. Is there one myth about microdosing that you would just like love to just pop, just burst?
I touched on it earlier. It's this kind of like food poisoning killer. I found out recently that I think Paul Stamets said it during his keynote at the MAPS conference that it's the deathly or the lethal dose of psilocybin is something like 30 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, which is totally impossible to consume.
Yeah, no
Can you imagine
way.
Having 30 1-pound steaks in your stomach.
I don't think you would be able to contemplate what eating a mushroom would even be at half of a pound of mushrooms or a quarter of a pound or even an ounce of mushrooms.
Like psychotic people who are really experienced doing super deep journey work or just psychedelic exploration, like 20 grams of a whole mushroom is an insane amount of, not 20 grams, not 20 pounds. You're not even remotely close.
20 grams is about 4 times what modern therapists will use for psychedelic assisted therapy. Usually that's 3 to 5 grams. In microdosing, we start at 0.1 of a gram. So we're talking like magnitudes.
100 milligrams?
100 milligrams or 0.1 of a gram. So we're talking just insane dosages for these things to be lethal. Meanwhile, we live in a country where tobacco and alcohol are available at every convenience store.
Yes. And there's a few other things I might add to the end of that sentence, but it was yours, not mine, so I will bite my tongue. But yes, there are a lot of substances. Cars.
I know.
It's interesting. And just for anybody who's super anal about things like me, because we're scientists and we like to pretend and hide behind nerdiness sometimes, 20 grams, which I totally 1,000% agree is a minimum of 4 times the upper limit of what most normal human beings would do.
I never come close.
Yeah, exactly. 20 grams is 0.044 pounds. So if you're at 5 grams, you're at 0.011 pounds. And 30 grams is potentially the lethal dose. So let's just get this out of our mind. People do not do, don't go doing crazy ass stuff without the proper setting in the proper environment with the proper people supervising. Understand what you're doing. Don't be blasé about it. But I totally agree. Like, we're overly concerned. And what's really crazy is when you look at the research on psilocybin and MDMA, and MDMA was even getting in these advanced phase pharmaceutical trials, when they asked them to repeat it to confirm the first one, that like 63% of people at the end of 3 experiences with the proper therapy and coaching before, during, and after, no longer met the criteria for their PTSD, which was, by the way, treatment resistant to all other forms of treating post PTSD in modern medicine. 63%, I think was the number in the first study. The second study was 72% of people finished. So the confirmation study showed it was even better than we initially thought. So it's like, we got to start getting this like taboo out of our mind. I'm not saying just like let everybody, like in British Columbia, apparently you can just go buy mushrooms at a store, at a mushroom store, just like you can buy cannabis. But these are very potent living beings and living plants that are intelligent and address and interact with them that way. But I agree 1,000%, don't be so concerned. So the other question I would have is, because we, not only do I work with a lot of patients, but our practitioners both are stressed out entrepreneurs, stressed out doctors working hard, whether they're working for themselves or other people. And then most of us run into normal human beings who are living on planet Earth these days. But do you have like a final message about specifically to doctors, lawyers, other high-level people who are trying to put their work out there in the world and putting their heart on the line with it, but are getting burnt out, like in terms of like, addressing, working themselves or with their patients and who are looking for new frontiers in healing?
My mother is a internist. She's a doctor, and my father's a psychologist. So I come from, that's my background, is being brought up in that type of very high learned, certified educational space. And my challenge to them, to those types of people, is to not be afraid of the new paradigm that is happening. If these things are working for people and they are extremely safe from a lethal dosage standpoint, give patients the freedom to try them in a safe setting, right? Tell them, try it at home or try it in a clinic. But by no means is it time to wait for an FDA approval, because it's just not going to come right now. There is so much we go into about those types of systems and the incentives that they may or may not have for keeping these types of substances illegal.
And keeping people sick, I would add, for myself. But
yeah, I mean, like I said, that is another podcast that I would love to have at another time.
Let's go. We'll do that. But that'll be part 2.
Yeah, right. But that will just be a much more, darker, sinister podcast. And I like the optimistic side of it, which is that these plants have been around forever. They've been helping societies and humans forever, our ancestors included. I believe in these plants. I believe in the stories of how these sacraments were part of ancient Greek society, ancient Judaism, ancient Egypt, ancient Christianity. These are sacraments that were used by civilizations for eons to help us connect more to the spirits, to the universe, to nature, to God, whatever you want to label it as. It brings us into another level of connection. And I believe that there has been a massive organized attempt to separate us from that connection to source. And I would encourage all professionals, whether you're doctors, lawyers, like you had mentioned earlier, scientists, to just keep an open mind and recognize that somewhere along the line, their ancient relatives use these types of medicines in some way or another. Wine was not always fermented grapes. Look it up.
No, it was not. I could not agree more, man. And that's the thing I find in my field. Like, you're saying waiting for an FDA approval. We just got FDA approval of testing that they've bastardized for over 30 years. But the company who offered this testing took the high road and got the science together, updated their testing mechanisms, and then worked with the FDA to get it approved. And what's so interesting about that is, in my field, for sure, over the last, like what I've heard in the last 25 years, in the last 5 to 8 years, we started to find out that what clinicians were seeing on the front line, what Seth and other people doing this kind of coaching are seeing on the front lines, has ultimately been proven to be true, because the people who are working here, in my opinion, are working from their heart and that connection to source. So it's way more lifeful, it's life affirming, and ultimately we see the science catches up. So I really love your message. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people who would be interested in learning more about microdosing. I highly recommend checking out the journal, even if you just go on the website and look at some of the PDFs of it, of the Microdosing Journal. You read one page on there, you'll be blown away at the structure and the simplicity. But to me, the first time I ever even looked at your website, I zoomed in and I read a little bit. And I just vibrated with like, this is truth. This is a way that can help a ton of people move in that direction of true healing. And that's really what we love sharing with people. It's like, I love the science. We could always talk more about science, and we could talk about the bad stuff too. But I agree with you. I like to focus on what I really want in life. And I want more people to journal with you. I want more people to experience the positive side of responsible, ethical, science-based use of these plants that have been around guiding humanity since our inception. So, which I don't know why the hell I just used the word inception. It came out of nowhere. But since humans became, well, I mean, like, maybe we'll do this again too, because like you kind of opened up the Terence McKenna conversation and the stoned ape hypothesis and all this. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of evidence that we saw huge jumps in humanity because early humanoids came across psychedelics and we grew together, or the psychedelics opened up the growth of the human mind. So that's a great, maybe, follow-up someday. So kind of in closing, love to give you an opportunity to let people know where to find you. And if they're interested, both to get the journal and if they're interested in learning more about working with you.
Sure. So my name is Seth Marcus, mindful psychedelic coach. You can find me at themindmill.com. I've created the Microdosing Journal, which has digital courses associated with it. So it's meant to provide practical and impactful education for microdosing and for self-growth. So I'm based on the Big Island of Hawaii. I also live part of the year in Denver. So I serve those two areas in person quite often. I'm also available online, and I'm just 100% in on this psychedelic renaissance that we're a part of, and I believe in it, and I believe in the responsibility of humans to show up right now. We've got thousands upon thousands of generations of our ancestors living very, very, very boring, uneventful lives for us to be living in this age of psychedelics, of AI, of having conversations with people across the world in real time on a screen. Like, this is a very, very special time. And I see it as like, we're in the season finale of humanity, possibly the series finale. We're in the season finale for sure. So it's time for us to show up as leaders.
Nice. Love your message. Everyone, Seth Marcus. I will have all of his stuff in the show notes, on all of our platforms, whether you're listening audio or video, you'll be able to directly connect with him. Reach out to him with all your psychedelic microdosing questions. He's a wealth of knowledge way beyond just psilocybin. But I think most importantly, even leaving the psychedelics out, he's a mindset coach and he's a life coach sort of approach person who resonates a lot with my message. And he's my go-to guy on that. So definitely reach out, check him out. Seth Marcus, thanks for joining us on the Lyme Insider, and everybody else, thanks for joining us too. Until next time, this is Dr. Tom, and live your passion and go out there, and the healing is in the living.